Our goals have to be visible. You have to keep your roadmap. Look, have you ever taken a trip in your car to a place you've never been before? What do you have on the seat beside you to make sure you get there? I've got to have my wife or my map. Either one will tell me where to go, okay? But without that, let me show you what happens. If you don't have your roadmap, let's see if I've got this. Look, what do you call this place on a road map? That little place right there, what do you call that? An intersection. You know what it really is? It's a decision point. Because you will get to a place on a road where you have to make a decision. Which way do I go? If I don't have a roadmap, what we do is we make our decision based upon what we can see from that decision point. Well, where should I go? I don't know, but there's a Krispy Kreme right there. I'm going there. Now I'm at another decision point. Now where am I going to go? I don't know, but there's a mall. I'm going to go. There's a golf course. And what we do is, do you ever find yourself spinning your wheels? Because we're sitting at our desk with no roadmap making decisions based upon the tyranny of the urgent. And at the end of the day, do you ever end up a week and your list was bigger than it was at the beginning of the week? Because we are not looking at the roadmap. We're making decisions based upon what we can see from that decision point. Now with the roadmap, here I sit, and I still have these other things. There's the Krispy Kreme and the mall and the golf course, but I also see, but if I really want to get here, and you remember how bought in I am to getting there? I better go here, and I will more likely make the right decision. Will I always make the right decision? No, sometimes I'm like, I know I need to get here, but I'm desperate for a Krispy Kreme. What's the advantage of having the roadmap if I do that? Because I still know how to get back on course and end up at that ultimate destination that I chose. You got to keep your roadmap in front of you. So that means every week when you're planning the next week, one of the things I have in front of me is my roadmap. And I look at that as I make decisions about how I'm going to spend the next week. When I'm deciding what I'm going to do with my time tomorrow, instead of looking, how many of you ever prioritize by the flame method? You look at your desk and you see which has the tallest flames leaping off of it. You'll be driving in circles all week, okay? You got to look at your roadmap to make those decisions. Okay, now, you also have to keep your roadmap visual. And here's what we visualize. The benefits of arriving here. And you've got to really focus on the benefits. And the benefits have to be bigger than all the obstacles that you're going to run into along the way. And listen, there are going to be some big obstacles. So you have to focus on the benefits. And if you'll do that, your goals really are roadmaps that you're excited about now because they are helping you get to that place that you can't wait to get to. Now, I'm still laying foundations here. I want to show you another step in this process. Oh, by the way, if you don't have a roadmap, I said, it's entirely possible you're lost and you don't even know it. You're just driving around. We got to know where we're headed, and then we got to have the roadmap that's going to help us get there. Now, I want to show you real quickly. This is a quick foundation. You don't have to write all this down if you don't want to. But when we talk about knowing how we're going to create balance in our lives, have you ever felt like the things in your life that were most important to you, you were able to invest the least amount of your time in? And the things that really weren't all that important took all of your time? Well, let me show you quickly. This is a foundational thing. I'm going to show you how to change that. And I'm going to give you a tool that I believe can change your life. All right? Let me show you this real quickly. This is Covey's Time Management Matrix. All this is a quick picture of how all of us are already using or investing time. So let me just throw it up here real quickly and show you how it works and then tell you why it's important. Quadrant 1 is called urgent and important. And this is things that you're familiar with. How many crises? How many of you spend part of your time putting out fires? All right, the more time you spend putting out fires, the more familiar you are with quadrant 1. And it can be, some of us live in quadrant 1. Unmet deadlines, you know about, you guys don't know about unmet deadlines, do you? I love what Dilbert says about deadlines. He says, I love deadlines. I especially love the whooshing sound they make as they blow by me. And if you've ever been in that setting where you don't get started on it until the deadline is the start time for some of us, then you're familiar with quadrant 1. Or pressing problems. Have you ever told somebody this? The lack of planning on your part does not constitute an emergency on my part. Well, that's just wishful thinking. Because there's a lot of times that a lack of planning on your part creates an emergency on my part. And now I'm in quadrant 1. And look what it's known for. Stress. It's the most stressful place we work. Now look at the difference in quadrant 1 and quadrant 2. Quadrant 2 is important, but it's not urgent. And it's things like prevention and planning and education, recreation, communication. Have you ever seen us have to redo something because the only communication we got from somebody asking us to do something was a little yellow sticky note? I'm not talking about surgeons here. But all we got was a sticky note. So we did what the sticky note said. We took it back to them, and they say, that's not what I asked for. Yes, it is. And we end up having to redo stuff because we don't invest the time in communication. And you know what they'll tell you? I was too busy. Well, now we're all going to be too busy for a while, aren't we? Because we have to redo stuff. Let me tell you something important about quadrant 2. Quadrant 2 is always an investment. And the time that we invest in quadrant 2 always has a return. And one of the returns you'll get on quadrant 2 is less time you have to spend in quadrant 1. And we're going to discover that more in just a minute, but just keep this in mind. If I spend time planning, that's not spent, that's invested. If I invest time in planning, that's less time we're going to have to spend in quadrant 1 redoing stuff because we didn't plan it well. It's an investment, and there's always a return on that investment. All right, look at quadrant 3 real quickly. You're familiar with this. Urgent, don't you love this? But not important. How many are familiar with things like this? Needless interruptions. How many of you work with somebody named Tweedledee? And you hear him coming down the hall. Hey, you got a minute? And you're like, no. Right? Look, he's there at your desk. There's nothing important about what he wants. What makes it urgent? Because he's there. And some of us feel that way about the phone. We forget that you don't have to pick it up. You pick up the phone and it's him. And you got to stop and deal. All right, unimportant meetings. Have you ever been to one of those? Everybody has to drop everything and be there right this instant, but no decisions were made in the meeting. Now what do we have to have? Another meeting. Somebody just please stick a fork in my eye. All right? Unnecessary reports. Some of your mail belongs in this category because we couldn't put the mail on your desk because we've seen your desk. So what we do is we wait for you to leave your desk, and while you're gone, we put it in your chair. So when you come back, you have to pick it up in order to sit down. And the thing on top says, limited time offer. You're like, I better look at that. All right, and you get caught up dealing with things that were dropped in your lap or forced upon you. They were urgent, they just weren't important. All right, look at this last one. Not urgent and not important. And you're thinking, nobody spends time there. Well, time wasters, have you ever finished a project like 5 minutes before you could leave somewhere? All the things that we do in order to avoid getting involved in another time-consuming project. Like look in your desk drawer and see if your paper clips are organized. You know what I'm talking about? Those kinds of things we do to avoid getting involved in things that'll take longer. Busy work, yeah, maybe not, but escape activities. I tell people if you are aware of and proud of your win-loss ratio in free cell, stuff like that, all right? Now, occasionally we have to take a breather, and that's fine. But too much time spent there, that's why this one's known for guilt. Now let me tell you what all this says. Covey says most of us end up caught up in the tyranny of the urgent, all right, in quadrants 1 and 3, dealing with things that were forced upon us, either important or not important, escaping occasionally for survival to quadrant 4. And yet the most productive people we know have found ways to invest more time where? In quadrant 2. Now here's the question. And remember what I told you, the more time you invest in quadrant 2, the less time you have to spend in quadrant 1. So how can I find ways to invest more time in quadrant 2 without extending my work week? Well, Covey's answer is this. Find ways when you can to say no to quadrants 3 and 4. And anytime you can, we invest that time in quadrant 2, and any time invested in quadrant 2 is less time invested in quadrant 1, and we become very productive, less stressed because it's less time in the stressful quadrant 1, and we're going to get some amazing things accomplished. Now, I said all that to tell you this. Your roadmap is quadrant 2. It's all those things you put on your roadmap, they all belong in quadrant 2. How am I ever going to find time to get all these things done? This is how. Now, let me show you in a realistic sense, how does this work? Instead of starting your week with a list and ending your week with a bigger list, I'm going to make appointments with my most important quadrant 2 items at the beginning of the week. Now, let me tell you a couple of reasons why this works. Now, you have to estimate how much time you're going to need to invest in those things to accomplish those. But there's some real reasons why this works the way it does. And let me show you a couple of things real quickly. Once you've determined how long you need to invest in those and you've prioritized them, I'm going to start my week. Look, if my week starts Monday morning at 8 o'clock, if I walk in and I've already done that planning, when did the planning occur? Bless you. It occurred the week before. And remember, I said there's always a return on the investment if you invest in quadrant 2. So I'm going to get a return this week. Let me show you. Have you ever showed up Monday morning and you haven't done the planning? So you show up like this. All right, I show up at my desk and I've got to get a cup of coffee. That's what I got to. And so I stumble off down to go get a cup of coffee. While I'm getting a cup of coffee, I run into this group. All right, they're around the coffee. Have you noticed they are always around the coffee machine? So I get caught up, around the coffee machine, and we're telling stories about the weekend, and some of them we don't really believe, and there's that whole integrity issue, but we get caught up. And so finally I get away, and while I'm leaving the coffee shop down there, I run into my boss who needs something. My boss is so needy. And so I'm writing on my hand what my boss needs, trying to keep from spilling my coffee, And then on my way still back to my office, I get a phone call, and it's a client. The only thing more needy than my boss is a client. So I'm on my way back to my office, and I sit down, and I have to clear off a place to be able to work, to be able to figure out what's the most important thing I need to work on. So I'm clearing off a place, and while I'm clearing off a place, I knock my coffee over. I have to clean that up, and then I get another phone call, and then my boss is there going, "You got that yet?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And so finally, I figure out the most important thing I need to work on is preparing for that quarterly meeting. So I'm like, okay, all right, quarterly, oh man, it's almost break time. I'd hate to start working on that and have to quit in the middle of it for break. I better organize my paper clips. You know what I'm talking about? Do you ever get halfway through the morning and you hadn't gotten started on the most valuable thing you could work on? And because of all these other things. But if I've done the planning, when I show up, I avoided the coffee shop because these guys. So I brought my coffee with me. And when I came in, the only thing on my desk was the folder for the quarterly meeting. I sat down, and that's the first thing I did. And it didn't take me as long as I thought. And then I've got extra time in my day. Now, the only two things I have planned on Monday are the quarterly meeting and the budget recommendations I need to get ready. Is that all I'm going to do that day? The rest of that time, that blank time, is what we call sand. I've got a big white plastic paint bucket on my desk, 3/4 full of sand. Beside it are these 7 big rocks, and they're labeled quarterly meeting and budget recommendations and all this kind of stuff. And I'm going to try to cram those rocks down in the bucket that's 3/4 full of sand. And I can't get them in there, right? But if I take the rocks out and pour the sand out and put the rocks in first, now what happens? In fact, it might not even all fit, but if I lose something, what do I lose? Sand. And look, the sand is all those unplanned things, the things I wasn't counting. Here's why it works that way. It's Monday afternoon, it's about 12:30, and I'm at my desk, which is a shock anyway, but I'm at my desk, and I get a phone call from a coworker who says, "Hey, Keith, man, I'm so excited about this project I'm working on. I want to run something by you. Can I get with you first thing Tuesday morning? I want to run something by you." Well, what do I tell him? I look at my roadmap for the week, and I say, "No, man, I've already got something planned first thing Tuesday morning. Now I've got some time around 9:30 or 10. Would that work for you?" If I've done the planning, now I'm in charge of my time. If I haven't done the planning, what do you tell the next person that calls? "Hey, can I get with you first thing in the morning?" "Yeah, bring the Krispy Kremes." And the next 10 people that call you are in charge of your week. And before you know it, you don't have anything left in your week except sand. And you get to the end of your week and your list is bigger than it was when you started with. What if my boss calls me and says, "I need to give you the first thing Tuesday morning. I want to run something by you." What do I say? "Yes, ma'am." And I might need to rearrange that. But let me tell you something, guys. Even in the case of a boss calling you, if you've done the planning, this will sometimes rescue you. Last time I had a boss that was like this, his name was Byrne. It's a place I worked in, Baton Rouge, and Byrne wanted to run stuff by me all the time. And I'd say, okay, Bern, I can do that. I can meet with you first thing Tuesday morning. Now, I had scheduled first thing Tuesday morning to finish those budget recommendations that you've been asking for. Do you really need to see me at 8 o'clock Tuesday morning, or will 9:30, 10 o'clock work for you? I cannot tell you how often Bern would say, oh, no, yeah, you're right. I probably won't be there at 8 o'clock anyway. I'm thinking, tell me something I don't know. All right. If you've done the planning, it's a whole lot easier. If you've not done the planning, you know how hard it is to tell your boss, I'd rather think of something else other than meet with you. It's not nearly as effective. So you plan the important things, you put them in there, and look, even if you only got 2 or 3 of them done, is that going to be a better week than a lot of weeks you've had? You fight to protect that time. Now, I said all of this to get you to the place where I want to show you how this can help you be your best for your world. This is called the balance sheet, and I think it's on page 9 in your handout, the 9 in your handout. On the left-hand side of this, what you do is, every week, you make a list of those roles in your life that are valuable to you in the order in which they fall this week. And I've given you an example, the real example out of my week, and you'll notice on my particular week that I showed you, husband was first this week. Probably what happened is the previous week I had done something which required that husband be first this week, okay? And I've color-coded these so I can show you what I'm talking about. What you do is you block out time in your week in a realistic way to make investments in the roles that are most important to you. Now look, I'm talking about making investments in, not being within screaming distance of, okay? Here's an example. Monday night that week, I had blocked out time to fix dinner for Suzanne. I love to cook. It's one of my favorite hobbies. I don't get to cook very often because I travel so much. But that night, I had planned to fix dinner for Suzanne. She loves my cooking because she does not cook. Ugh. All right? So for me to make time to go get the stuff and fix a nice dinner, that's an investment. It's not just cooking dinner. How many of you know what I'm talking about? That's an investment in the relationship. In fact, you'll notice I left a little time afterwards because you're always hoping for a return on the investment. Okay? And I didn't just leave 5 minutes either. I got 2 hours in there, baby. That's a big investment. I'm taking her to the mall to shop. How many of you know that's an investment in more ways than one? She loves the Mavs. I took her to a Mavs game. Baby, we're hoping for some return this week. All right, now look. How many of you know people who can go a week, a month, or longer and never actually invest in the person that's most important to them? You have to plan it. Look, if you don't plan those things, how many of you know your night is gone before you know it? And you know what takes it away from you? The TV guide will rob you of the opportunity to invest in the person most important to you. Here's where I want to show you what I mean most of all. Look at this middle day, Wednesday. Breakfast with Aaron. Get rid of the yellow jackets with Daniel. Have you ever learned some of the most valuable lessons in your life through the School of Hard Knocks? I went years not knowing this lesson about investments. And for a long time, 15 years, I did not have a good relationship at home. And every time I'd come home, I've traveled and trained all my adult life. And every time I'd come home for 15 years, I'd be in trouble for something. Never knew what it was going to be. I'd be in trouble for something. What's the typical male response to the fact that if every time you come home you're in trouble? What do you do? Just quit coming home. And when I did come home, I'd just stick my head in the door in my suit and tell the kids I was home. They'd come out and they'd play in the yard with me in my suit. But I didn't want to go in the house where that woman was. I did that for 15 years until one day when I came home, I found out we were getting a divorce because I hadn't been making any investments. And I found myself in the situation where now I'm away from my kids. In order to support my kids now, I'm on the road. I'm living on the road to try to support 2 households, to try to take care of them, to give them every opportunity. And I had a lot of opportunities to use excuses not to be a great dad. Okay? But that's not what my destination statement says about me as a dad. It says I'm a great dad. I love spending time with my kids. I make opportunities for us to spend time together. I have a great and growing relationship with my children. That's what my destination statement says. And this is the tool that for the last 10 years I've used to make that happen. And I'll do things like this. And that's a real day where I flew down the night before. By the way, another investment. All of my frequent flyer miles, which I have there's never any question about what those are for. They're always to get them to me or me to them. I've never used them for a business purpose. They're always to get them to me or me to them. I flew down that night. They live in Baton Rouge, and I'm here in the Dallas area in order to be where the majority of my clients were. So I flew down that night, and I took Aaron actually to Krispy Kreme. We always have a daddy date, and it was to Krispy Kreme. When I got back, Daniel and I, we love projects. We're like Tim the Tool Man and Out of Control Son on steroids, all right? It's... We're very dangerous around tools, but that's never stopped us yet. And the project we had found was my youngest son, John Mark, had jumped up on the fence to see where his ball went, and he uncovered a yellow jacket nest somewhere near the base of the fence. He got 50 stings before he got in the house. The yellow jackets came in the house with him because they left the door open, so everybody got stung. So Daniel and I said, well, the men will handle the yellow jackets. So I got Daniel in the car. We went down to our favorite toy store, Home Depot, and we loaded up on poison. All right, the trunk, the EPA followed us home, okay? And we got back out there in the backyard, and we didn't know where exactly, but somewhere near that fence there were some yellow jackets. There was this area that was kind of sunken a little bit, and there were some heavily packed leaves in there, and somewhere in those leaves there was a yellow jacket nest. So we got these long sticks, and we would poke and spray, and we looked like Jedi. You know, we were just, it was wonderful. But there were so many, we had poked and sprayed until we were knee-deep in empty cans, and they're still flying. So I said, okay, son. It's time to break out the heavy artillery. Go get the gasoline. So Daniel brings the 5-gallon can of gasoline over to the wooden fence, and so now we're poking holes in the dirt and we're pouring gasoline in there because we know that's going to kill them, right? Well, no. Now they think we're just having a little margarita party, all right? Now they're just flying around us singing little Jimmy Buffett songs, all right? And they're still coming. So I said, all right, son, back up. You know, I forgot what those gasoline fumes have been doing all this time we've been waiting. And literally, when the match came off the box, that the entire backyard ignited. This 10 square foot area of heavily packed leaves went like this. Boom! Whoa! Nothing but thick white smoke and these little yellow jacket meteorites. Zing, 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 zing. And out of the corner of my eye, I see my 15-year-old son Daniel like this. Whoa! Dad! That is so cool! Let's do it again. Now, I told you all of that to tell you this. You know, we uncovered this yellow jacket nest, by the way, that was bigger than a basketball. And all these little fried yellow jackets in these little layers, you know, it was just absolutely amazing. And Daniel took it to school the next day and ended up getting sent home because he found out they weren't all fried. And the fence caught on fire, and we found out at that point is when we learned that the hose wasn't long enough. We burned the fence down, actually. And here's the crazy thing. I've traveled the world telling people this story. I've been every U.S. state, Canada, Mexico, England, Scotland, Ireland. I've told thousands of people this story, literally. And it's on my website. It's one of my favorite stories on my website, and it's one of my favorite stories to tell. And I was at home for Christmas probably 5 years ago. My son's now in college. He's now graduated, but at that time he was in college. And I told Daniel, I said, you know what, Daniel, that is my favorite story to tell people. And my son said, Dad, I've told every friend I have about that story. Now, here's my question for you. How many of you recognize you only have so many opportunities to make investments with the people that you care about the most? And if you don't, plan for it. If you don't know where you're headed, if you don't know what's most important to you, somebody else will be making those decisions for you, and one day you'll look back and it's too late. I'm going to tell you, right now you have to know where am I headed and how am I going to get there. Because if you don't know that, you're not going to know what your roadmap is, and you're not going to know how to protect your time. you have to take responsibility. If you're going to be your best for your world, how many of you know those roles, those people, that's your world? And if you're going to be your best, you have to know where you're headed and how you're going to get there. You have to have a roadmap, and you have to be jealous about protecting your time. Your time is your most valuable thing if you're going to be your best for your world. Guys, when it comes to using all of this with your teams, if you'll turn with me real quickly to page 18, I want to show you one thing real quickly, and then we're going to close. Look at page 18. I've got a little graphic there that shows a leader with his eyes on the destination. And it says, you'll notice right in front of that, it says the team in the trenches. Listen, guys, there's many times if we are going to motivate our troops, we talk all the time about, well, we just need to motivate our team. If your team is in the trenches and they're down there doing the daily work, they're involved in the daily grind, here's the thing. Many times they lose sight of the destination because they're down there in the trenches. And your role as leader is to stay out of the trenches. You got to keep out of the little daily details. You got to keep out of the daily grind. As a leader, your role is to have a laser-like focus on that destination so that while your team is in the trenches and they can't see the destination, you can clearly describe to them, it's just over the bend. We are almost there. And that's what's going to motivate your troops to keep them at that daily grind and allow them to arrive with you at that destination. Listen, I'll close with this story. Some of you may have heard this story. I'm going to condense it and just tell you quickly. You may have heard about the young lady that decided she was going to swim the English Channel, and she trained and trained and trained to swim the English Channel. And the day that she finally got to the place, she felt she was strong enough, and this was the day they had planned. It was very, very overcast, and it was a terrible weather day. It's bad weather days a lot of days at the English Channel. But she believed she was strong enough, and she got out there to start swimming. And they have a boat that goes along beside them to make sure they don't drown. But the boat, they can't help them. They can't do anything to help them. And she swam, and she swam. She was against the current many times. She swam so long that it now was dark. It's foggy. It's dark. She can't see anything. She has no idea where she is. She swam until she literally believed she was about to drown. She finally called to the boat and said, "I can't go anymore. Come and pick me up." When she grabbed the boat and did this, her feet touched the bottom. She was literally feet from the shore. She gave up because she couldn't see where she was headed. And you've got members of your team who lose sight of where they're headed. And your job as the leader is to call out to them, "We're just this far. We are almost there. Don't give up." Know where you're headed. Have a roadmap. And clearly communicate to your team, "We are almost there." Thank you very much.
Thank you, Keith. Acute words of wisdom. Let's give Keith another round of applause. Well, very quickly, I want to share something with you. Some of the things that Keith was saying is very